Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Adam Green here with No More News. Thank you all for joining me today. Monday, January 27th, 2025. Got a huge show today. Going to be discussing a deep dive, researching the anti-Christian sentiment, the anti-Christian statement, and the anti-Christian agenda of Germany. This video is tons of material in old historical quotes, a whole bunch of tabs, a bunch of clips, and old quotes that I think will really illuminate their view of Christianity being essentially Jewish, foreign, and fake, and not the future of Germany. The reason I'm addressing this is because there's a growing meme on the internet of people who are critical of Jews that are Christian that are trying to pretend that Hitler and Germany and the Nazis were all a bunch of hardcore Christians and that Christianity was at the core of their movement, like this quote that Hitler said, which, considering, just like politicians today lie and pretend to be Christian, you can't get elected if you don't claim to be Christian. And they would have never rose to power in a predominantly Christian Germany unless they gave lip service to Christians. But once they got in, as you'll see, almost all of their top guys and on the official level were definitely heading in a direction away from Christianity. They had their positive Christianity. So online, the most famous documentaries about World War II revisionism are Europa: The Last Battle and The Greatest Story Never Told. And both of those portray Hitler and the Nazis as devout Christians. And they are, although it's almost like they're cherry picking and ignore a couple quotes and ignoring all the rest of the evidence that we're going to get into today. And really, this is unnecessary. Almost everybody knows, like 99% of all people know, that Nazi Germany was pagan and was turning away from Christianity. They had positive Christianity. They were bringing back Germanic paganism, and they were getting rid of Christianity, essentially. They were at least transitioning away from it. So 99% of all people know this, but a fringe minority online likes to lie and ignore, because if they acknowledge this, that all the things that they were saying about Christianity, it would almost confirm all the similar things about Christianity that people have been saying since then. So huge shout out to, so there's all these types of memes too, and this is very popular on Twitter and on, alternative video streaming and video posting sites. Very popular to portray the Nazis as hardcore Christians. But we're going to do start off with a thread from our buddy Volkish Spirit. Some of the top statements that refute this, and they're just ignoring the big picture and the full truth. We're just going to cover all the other stuff, and it'll really educate everybody to exactly what they were thinking. Is the music too loud in the background? We're listening to the most famous German composer, who I've not really ever heard of, Richard Wagner. I mean, I've heard of him, but not familiar with his classical music gems. We're playing the best of Richard Wagner to set the scene. Yeah, only coping anti-Semitic Christians like to promote that the National Socialists were Christian. They're not given the full picture. So, starting with Volkish Spirit, Robert Ley, head of the German Labor Front, wrote, "The Jew Paul wanted to take everything from us, our God and our German soul. The Jew is chosen to bring us German salvation. The Pauline doctrine promises heaven to those who subject themselves to it, but hell to those who reject this Jewish dogma. You're going to burn in hell forever if you don't believe in the magical Jewish superhero and the blood atonement sacrifices." Exactly like the head of the Labor Front said that. Okay. Exactly like we're saying today. "What have we to do with the Moses and the Jewish prophets? Why do we care about these fake Jewish prophecies? At a time when the German people is fighting for its life against Jewry, who dares to speak to us of the rabbis named Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and all the rest of them? Yeah, hard to pretend like you're against Jews when your whole religion is intimately connected to Jewish prophecy and the Jewish God. The Pauline doctrines call upon Yahweh, the terrible Jewish God, the Jehovah's Witnesses, and their kin plague our air and daily remind us that we are a long way from overcoming the Jew. That's how I feel. As long as there's the Christian-controlled opposition and the Christians and Muslims, the two biggest religions in the world, affirming and elevating the idea of Hebrew Torah prophecy and messianism, we're a long way from ever overcoming Yahweh and the Torah prophecy agenda. The physical Jew has been taken from our midst, but his Mosaic and Pauline spirit still lives among us with the spiritually Jewish Christians. Anyone who has any ties at all to it can never fight completely and radically against the Jews. In other words, your limited hangout, controlled opposition. If you're not opposing Yahweh and the idea that their prophecies are real, the idea that they were ever chosen, you're not actually really opposing the core fundamental identity of Judaism. So that was 1944 from Dresden, Robert Ley, head of the Labor Front. Now, Richard, I'm going to get all these names right. I don't speak German. Richard Dahr, Reich Minister of Food and Agriculture, says, the church had withdrawn masses of the most valuable blood from its natural destiny through the persecutions of witches, pagan European girls. This is the path of Judaism in the 19th century, especially in the time immediately behind us, was more bloodless, but in its effect on our national power by no means less effective. The Jewish destruction of the German woman corresponds to the Christian church persecution of witches. Both have a common spiritual father, Yahweh. Yeah, Christian Europeans burning other Europeans at the stake as heretics or because they're pagans, burning their pagan pre-Christian philosophy and literature and destroying and defacing our statues and our sculptures and our beautiful architecture and temples, all in the name of the jealous monotheistic God of the Jews. Handbook for German Army Officers, Why We Fight, 1944, assorted quotes. What means and methods does the Jew use to gain dominion over the nations? He dominates the peoples spiritually. Theological warfare. Dominates through the mind control of religion. I haven't even read all these yet, honestly. This thread specifically, I've covered a lot more on past shows, but this is just going to be the whole show deep dive for posterity to destroy the lying Christians on the internet. As a member of the so-called chosen people, he dominates the people spiritually with the help of his political ideas. As a member of the so-called chosen people, who even inspired a religion to mankind, Christianity, it was not difficult for him to find a way into all peoples. The very idea of being God's called people always had to give Judaism great impetus. In any case, the form of religious and political faith laid down in the law of Moses in the whole of the Old Testament to allow Judaism to resist a whole world for millennia because of Christianity. To make it almost imperishable. You can't destroy it because Christianity shields it and protects it and doesn't allow anybody to say the Torah is nonsense. Christianity and Islam wiped out paganism while ensuring the survival of Judaism and, in effect, protecting Judaism, which is now more powerful than ever today. When the Israelites returned from exile, and some of them immediately immigrated to the diaspora, they were incapable of any kind of warlike action. their lust for power and world domination were spiritually transformed into the grandiose idea of a cosmic final judgment on non-Jewish humanity. Through Yahweh and into the Messiah's hope, according to which Yahweh would create a paradise on earth for the Jews with all material pleasures. Even the Christians' teaching bear witness to this, the real originators of which are the Jews. An absurd beginning then to contradict Jewish emancipation on religious grounds. On every holy day, the teachings of Jewish heroes and poets were proclaimed to the people, a proof that they were considered morally superior. And we debate Christians today, and they'd say, we need Christianity because we'd have no morals without it. Well, Christianity is a Jewish movement. The Old Testament, the Torah, and the Talmud show a complete historical correspondence. A continuous metaphysical structure links religious, political, and ideological worldviews and has left its mark on the Jewish face for millennia. The germ cell and carrier of its entire world of ideas was its priesthood, the rabbinate. They represented the center from which all political and ideological ideas emanated, but also the organization that carried his world of ideas into the future. The priesthood is still leading upper classes today. And that was Handbook for German Officers. Himmler, one of Hitler's top guys on forced Christianization. About 1,500 years ago, a large part of the people who became Christians and were baptized, which was always the sign of Christianization, were not baptized out of inner conviction. It was rather the case that at first a number were baptized out of opportunism. These were the traitors among this people, and the others were baptized after personal persecution by fire and sword. And still later, many adopted the Christian conviction and worldview in order to escape persecution and torture. Himmler in a speech in 1937. If Hitler was a devout Christian and Germany was a Christian movement, why was Himmler one of his top guys saying things like this? They would say one thing to the masses and in the press, and behind the scenes, they were moving away from it, undoubtedly. Himmler on overcoming Christianity. We will have to deal with Christianity in a tougher way than hitherto. We must settle accounts with this Christianity, this greatest of plagues that could have happened to us in our history, which has weakened us in every conflict. And our generation does not do it when then would I think drag on for a lifetime. We must overcome it within ourselves. Today at Heydrich's funeral, I intentionally expressed in my oration from my deepest conviction a belief in God, a belief in fate, an ancient one, as I called him. That is the old Germanic word, Ralda. By rooting our people in a deep ideological awareness of ancestors and grandchildren, we must once more persuade them that they must have sons. We can do a very great... The Christians debate and say, you have to be Christian, Europe has to be Christian, otherwise our birth rates will plummet and we won't have any children. And I say, you can promote big families and incentivize reproduction without Christianity. We have a great deal, but everything that we do must be justifiable for the clan, our ancestors. If we do not secure this moral foundation, which is the deepest and best because the most natural, we will not be able to overcome Christianity on this plane and create the Germanic Reich, which will be a blessing for the earth. 1942. And all of these are sourced and legit. By the way, none of these are made up. These guys have done incredible research. I've read none of these books of the source material. This is all just aggregated. They send them to me, basically. They tag me and send them to me. Himmler on Christianity as alien and shameful. Which of us wandering through the lovely Germanic countryside and coming unawares upon a crucifix does not feel deep in his heart a strange but enduring sense of shame, The gods of our ancestors were different. They were men and carried in their hands a weapon which typified the natural characteristics of our race, namely readiness to act and self-reliance. How different this pale figure on the cross, whose passivity and emphasized suffering express only humility and self-debasement, qualities which we, conscious of our heroic blood, utterly deny. The corruption of our blood caused by the intrusion of this alien philosophy must be ended. That's Hitler or Christ, a textbook in Nazi Germany. Oh, a portrayal of Christianity in the history textbooks of Nazi Germany. Oh, and every one of these links, they always provide the link too. Okay, turn down the music. Off? I kind of like it. Is that better? I turned it down a little bit. Agree? Okay. 1 in the chat if you want me to turn it off. On in the chat if you want me to leave it on. Or off or on in the chat. I like it. Oh, it's Kurt Wagner. Wagner, right. He is one of my favorite composers of the 19th century, along with Chopin. Okay. All right. On. Everybody's saying on, guys. I turned it lower. All right, we're leaving it on. I like it. All right, what else do we have here? Intrusion. That was a fire one. Himmler on Christianity as Bolshevism. 150 years ago, someone at a Catholic university wrote a doctoral thesis with the title, "Does a Woman Have a Soul?" From this, the whole tendency of Christianity emerges. It is directed at the absolute destruction of women and at emphasizing the inferiority of women. The entire substance of the priesthood and of the whole of Christianity is, I am firmly convinced, an erotic union of men from the construction and maintenance of this 2,000-year-old Bolshevism. I think that the ons won it, guys. Sorry. I turned it down as much as I could. All right. Alfred Rosenberg, Director of Intellectual and Ideological Education at the NSDAP. Excerpts from his book, Myth of the 20th Century, which was banned by the Vatican. This proved thoroughly justified, for no sooner had Christianity become the state religion under Constantine than the Old Testament spirit of hatred showed its hideous face. The Christians at once demanded the application of the punishment prescribed in the Old Testament against the worship of idols. In Italy, with the exception of Rome itself, the temples of Jupiter were closed. We can sympathize with the despair of Emperor Julian. Yes, we can. The God of Israel, the whole objective of Judaism and the Messiah is to theologically conquer and subdue all the nations, eradicate all the ethnic gods in the pagan pantheon of gods and myths and legends and lore and ancestors, and conquer it and Judaize it. And they all recognize this because it's obvious. If you're not brainwashed in the cult, and you have any discernment, and you're informed on what Judaism and Christianity and Abrahamism teaches, this is the only conclusion, if you're being honest. Page 74. The Christian, and this is, what was this again? Rosenberg. Not Jewish, by the way, German. The Christian movement, disrupting old forms, seemed to be Pharisee Saul to hold great promise of practical usefulness. He joined its ranks, possessed by an unrestrained fanaticism. He preached international revolution against the Roman Empire. Despite all subsequent attempts at reform, his teachings still retain the Jewish spiritual basis, the Talmudic Oriental aspect of both the Catholic and the Lutheran churches. Paul accomplishes something that is never admitted in religious circles. He made the suppressed Jewish national rebellion internationally effective, thus paving the way for the further spread of racial chaos in the ancient world. The Jews in Rome knew this very well when they offered their synagogues as places where he could make his proselytizing speeches. And all the rabbis say the same thing about Paul and Christianity and Judaizing everybody. They say the same thing. And when we show clips of the rabbis saying these things, the Christian Nazis say, "You believe the Jews? Oh, you trust those lying Jews?" And then crickets when we read them all these quotes, confirming all the same thing that are just obvious to anybody that's being honest. But by then, the Bible had been a popular work, and the prophecies of the Old Testament integral to religion. Yeah, it's all at the core of prophecy deception. As a result, the Judaization and listlessness of our life were pushed a step further, and it's no wonder that thenceforth blonde German children were forced every Sunday to sing, to you, O Jehovah, will I sing, for where is such a God as you?" The so-called Old Testament, The so-called Old Testament must be abolished. Okay, it's not letting me zoom in for some reason. The so-called Old Testament must be abolished once and for all as a book of religion. By this, the unsuccessful attempt by the last 1,500 years to make us spiritually into Jews will be eliminated. That's some fire. Homer represented the highest enhancement of what was Greek, and he guarded this even in decline. Jehovah is the symbol of unbridled Jewry. The belief in Jehovah is the strength of even the lowest Jewish haggler. The unity also holds for German history, for its people, its values, for the very old and new myth, and for the supporting ideas of German folkhood. One form of Odin is dead. That is Odin, who was the highest of the many gods, and who has appeared as the embodiment of a generation still given up to natural symbolisms. But Odin, as the eternal mirror image of the primal spiritual power of Nordic man, lives today, just as he did over 5,000 years ago. All right, this is a thread of 10, I believe. Official National Socialist periodical magazine on St. Paul. The foresight for a doctrine that declared all natural differences of blood and race to be a delusion, and from the point of view of being a child of God, divided people into good and bad. And this Stoic philosophy created the abstract concept of global citizenship. The even more spiritual concept of heaven citizenship emerged in Christian thought. St. Paul gives the citizenship of heaven a meaningful expression by wanting to see not only all the ethnic differences, but also all socially and sexual differences abolished for his worldwide community. It could not be avoided that this religious citizenship of heaven, as soon as it claimed to be the sole idea of life, would have come into conflict with a national racial state order. Okay. 7. Adolf Hitler, lesser known quotes from a 1920 public speech titled "Why We Are Anti-Semites." We know that it was precisely the Jew who used Christianity, not out of love for Christianity, but in part only out of the realization that this new religion rejected earthly power and state authority above all, and recognized only a higher supernatural Lord. That this religion had to lay the axe to the root of the Roman state, which was built on the authority of the authorities, and he, the Jews, became the bearer of this new religion, its greatest propagator. Hitler 1920 speech. Intimate family did not prevent their Jews' own archfather Abraham for a moment. Okay, pimping his own wife. Pimping his wife. Okay. It is not necessary that everything the Bible says is true word for word, but on the whole it does give an extract of at least the conception of the history of Judaism, as it is made up by the Jews themselves. Made up a religion that they're chosen by God and meant to rule the other nations? I can't believe it. They would never make that up. And there we see that the Jew writes this work quite harmlessly. There is nothing monstrous about him describing how he has used cunning and deceit to infiltrate and contaminate race after race, was always thrown out, but chose another one without being offended. How he pimped and bargained when it came to his ideal, prepared to sacrifice his family too. The swastika as a pre-Christian symbol, we know that all these northern people had one symbol in common, the symbol of the sun. They created cults of light, and they've created symbols of the tools for making fire. It is the swastika, which was one sign of established communities of Aryan culture. And this is from the book, okay, I'm not going to be able to read that, but Adolf Hitler's speech in the Hofbrauhaus, that's the beer hall, right? Sausage Hall in Munich, 1920. Memorandum from Bormann, another top official. From Bormann's office, memorandum. From a conversation that took place with Hitler. The missionaries who came to Germania to spread Christianity were political commissars. The Roman state was destroyed by Christianity, and the so-called religion of Paul revolutionized the slaves and the subhuman elements of Roman society. Christianity is in every age characterized by its cultural effects. The Roman artist, the Roman state, created the finest works of art. The so-called works of art made by the Christians of those years that have been preserved in the catacombs show Bolshevik, futuristic traits. The whole magnitude of the contrast between barbarism and Christianity is revealed in the hygiene both inspired. We still to this day wonder at the Roman aqueducts and baths. In contrast, Christianity suppressed every form of sanitation made necessary by nature. A man became a saint by living in his own excrement. Even today, it is forbidden for nuns to bathe undressed. Is that true? Nuns bathe in their robes? And it's interesting to think about how they were saying all of this long before the creation of Israel, or not too long before, right before the creation of Israel, and Christian Zionism to really explode and manifest itself like we've seen today, with Christians all around the world like worshiping a foreign people. They were saying all this before the Christian Zionists went crazy. Volkish Spirit is here. Good to have you here, my friend. A whole lot of reading for this show. What a day. Coincidentally, today, guys, is Holocaust Remembrance Day. Coincidentally, the same day that I do this show. Imagine that. Not planned out, too. I realized it right before I went live. I've been saying I'm going to do this show for weeks, if not months. And we're here. How would the world look if Christianity had not come and scientific discovery had not stopped for around 1,500 years? The extent to which Christianity destroyed the so-called barbarian culture is something we can hardly imagine today. Something similar might have happened if Thomas Munsert had established himself in his doctrine. What we need are history books by National Socialist scholars who possess a strong, realistic sense and therefore do not come up with completely idiotic hypotheses. Yeah, we need we need to get realistic is what we need to do. Good, that's what I'm always saying. Number 9, official NSDAP booklet on National Socialist cultural policy. When Christianity nourished from Jewish and Middle Eastern sap comes to Rome, a new core grows in the empty shell. The Roman Catholic Church, with its clergy, organized into the fighting church, continues the religion of the Roman army. With its claim to world importance, the empire's claim to worldly power with intellectualized religious means. The so-called champion view that before Christianity, genuine morality existed nowhere, aside from perhaps the Jews, is just as outrageous as narrow-minded and visibly false. It's funny how all of the things I've experienced and observed with Christians and my thoughts on dealing with Christianity and in studying Christianity, and it feels like real vindication to see so many people in the past noticing the exact same things. That's why the Christians are so desperate. The internet Christians are so desperate to cover up all of this information of their critiques of Christianity. And they lie and gaslight and say they were all devout Christians. There's so much higher. False. One must not simply equate morality and Christianity as one, and there is much high morality outside of Christianity, which in its denominations encompasses only a fraction of mankind, even of cultured mankind. We will never share the dogmatic intolerance of political Catholicism and Protestantism, rather oppose it with clear determination. Yeah, Judaism and Messianism is intolerant of any other people's cultures and traditions and holidays and religions and gods. Jealous, monotheistic God of the Jews, their fictional God that chose them, wants to conquer and subdue theologically all of the world. Yeah, these guys were smart and green-pilled. Some of the best philosophers and artists and scholars and scientists. And that's not like me making that up. This is like a well-known thing. And I do have lots of German ancestry as well. What hinges on the moral values of Germanic man shows itself, especially in the North, when Christianity destroys it even before it takes inward roots. For the zealots of the new faith, Christianity, teach the eternal damnation of the ancestors, and soon grave robbers. We got a commercial. And teach external damnation of our ancestors, and soon grave robbers dig up the mounds of prehistory with gold-greedy hands. Woman, up until the highly revered as close to the divinity, is now considered as in league with the devil. A previously unknown martyr creating cruelty sets in as a result of this merciless conversion in the North. And that was the official NSDAP booklet for their policy. Number 10, last one on this tab. Alfred Rosenberg again on the New Testament. Quote, "The New Testament can therefore no longer provide a decisive basis for the formation of a new spiritual community. To try this again today after 1,000 years of failure would mean starting a new fruitless task." It's a fruitless task to try to say Christian anti-Semitism, more messianic, Jews killed Jesus, Jews worship the devil, they're the fake Jews, where you have the new covenant. All of that is fruitless. It's dead on arrival. It's a non-starter. All it does is play the villain and give them their victimhood status. You're never going to overcome. You're completely dominated by establishment mainstream Christianity that will call you a heretic and disavow you and ban you and excommunicate you from the churches. The research into these stories in the examination of this era no longer has anything to do with religion, but only become a matter of historical research. The New Testament is no longer the present, but a dying past. It's all fake Jewish midrash prophecy fulfilling mystical Judaism. Unfathomably based, I know. Hitler on Christians validating Jewish prophecy. Like what I always say. Christians try to argue and impose that magical Jewish prophecies are real. If you believe Jewish prophecies are real, you've already lost. You've already lost their game. You've already ceded power to them as God's chosen people. The influence of world Jewry on this earth has already become so strong that it not only sees the dream of the fathers of a coming world domination come true. He hasn't even seen the rebuilt Israel and Gog and Magog war and Israel rising to a cyber superpower in the domination over America. And he says that domination is already coming true, but also prepares the peoples destined for destruction with cynical baseness. Serious Bible students, Christians, walk as the forerunners of the eternal Jew through the individual peoples and countries and proclaim the approach of the 1,000-year empire, preventing possible resistance from the outset with the cunning reference to divine prophecies. Christianity prevents possible resistance from the outset. Christianity is not opposing Yahweh in the messianic prophetic conspiracy. It has taken up the cause. It promotes Yahweh Messiah supremacy with cunning reference to divine prophecies. So true. No lies detected. How shameful. All the big influencers on Twitter and the internet that are covering up all of this information about what they were saying about Christianity that completely vindicates all of us and our examination of Christianity and how it plays out and the dynamic Christianity and Islam have with Christianity. That was 1937. Himmler tells the church their time is over. I once told a high-ranking church representative, your time is over. Now you will face exactly what you did to us. The 2000... Okay, it keeps messing up. I can't do the zoom. The 2,000 years where you lived in the sunshine and we in the shadows have come to an end. Now we will live in the sunshine and you in the shadows. Himmler's speech, 1937. So this is another account. Hitler hated Christ. And he is a Christian who doesn't like everybody lying and saying Hitler was a devout Christian and exposes him as a pagan. He did a whole thread here, but we're going to skip and I'm going to give my voice a rest and we're going to just show you a couple of the leading Catholic Christians also say, without question, they know Germany was a pagan movement. So here is a Bishop Richard Williamson, who also, coincidentally, just passed away today or yesterday. What odd timing for this stream.
Okay. The Ancient Ones says, why did God allow the Axis powers to lose the war?
Because Hitler was a pagan. Would be my flash.
Christian says Hitler lost the war because he was a pagan. He lost the war versus the Judeo-Christians and the Zionist allied America and Europe. And of course the Bolsheviks in Russia. Lucas Gage says Hitler was a Catholic. Yeah. How much of a misrepresentation is that for all these guys to... I see some of these guys wearing crosses with swastika, a symbol that they apparently outlawed as well, we'll cover. That's what I'm saying. These Christians are lying and not giving you the full truth about their views on Christianity. So the Catholic bishop says Hitler lost because he was not a Christian and he was a pagan.
Because Hitler was a pagan. Would be my flash answer and my swift answer. He was a great German patriot, but he was a pagan. In other words, he refused Jesus Christ and he refused the Catholic Church.
Yeah, I know he was born and raised a Catholic, just like I was born and raised a Christian. Would you still call me a Christian? Say that I was on video 25 years ago saying that I believed in Jesus. Are they going to quote me and then ignore, the last 10 years of me exposing Christianity and clearly not being a Christian?
And that was very unwise. He was a brilliant politician in many ways, but he had the wrong goals. And he did not put God in his right place, and that was fatal. And therefore Germany was smashed. Franco...
Smashed. Germany is smashed. If you don't worship the King of the Jews, you're smashed by all the rest of the Christians. And they had Catholic and Protestant traitors in Germany as well. And they were colluding with Jews and allied with Jews. So if you don't want to worship the God of the Jews, you'll get destroyed by Christians who ally with Jews. That's what this this is like, I think there's a clip of him denying the Holocaust, and also the clip of, he's like the anti-Jewish Catholic, like one of the only anti-Jewish Catholics, and he just died today also.
Defended God defended the Catholic cause, and therefore God gave him victory over the communists, one of the very rare victories in modern times over communism, over the advance of communism. Mussolini half looked after God, half did not look after God, and he half got smashed. Hitler defied God big time and got completely smashed.
Defied God. So are you going to call him a lying Jew? One of the top anti-Semitic Catholics in the world, another top anti-Semitic Catholic in the world, also will tell you the same thing. Here's E. Michael Jones.
Okay, so Hitler comes to power, can't unify Germany because of the Catholic-Protestant split, tries to do it, can't do it, so he has to unify.
So he couldn't unify Germany because Christianity is sectarian and didn't unite Europe and divided, and there's Europeans divided over differences on Jewish scripture. So that's a Christian problem. Sorry.
Okay, so Hitler comes to power, can't unify Germany because of the Catholic-Protestant split, tries to do it, can't do it, so he has to unify them according to neo-pagan myths based on Wagner and Nietzsche and all of this godlessness.
All of this godlessness. They didn't worship the Jews enough. They didn't believe the Jews' prophecies and that they were magical and worshiped the King of the Jews and the God of Israel.
Just had a corrupting effect on. Okay, so Hitler comes to power, can't you?
So all your leading anti-Semitic Catholics all admit without question that Hitler was a pagan.
And imperil all the other races, just like it did in the past. And it's true. I mean, Hitler was a pagan in many ways. And, you know, some of his people were into the occult and esoteric stuff, and they were into eugenics. But I think people, you know, non-white
Occult and esoteric stuff, like that's what they call paganism, pretty much, right?
people rightly don't want to be killed or lost in the gene pool. I think imperil all the.
All right. Oh, what's this here? Volkish note. Nick is 100% correct, and it's blatantly obvious truth for anyone who is intellectually honest. All it takes is a brief and critical look at National Socialist writings and policies, and it swiftly becomes crystal clear that this was not a Christian movement. From its very inception, a political party that espoused race and blood as the foundation of its political doctrine is already instantly at odds with biblical teachings. This should go without saying. But many online anti-Semitic Christians prefer to bend scripture in order to make it fit. And that's from Volkish Spirit in the chat, who basically did all of the research for this show. So the Nazis say the things about Christianity. The Romans say the same thing about Christianity. The Catholics are saying that Hitler and the Nazis were pagan. The Jews are saying that Nazi and the Hitler were pagan. And then the lying, coping, gaslighting Christians online are going to try to ignore all this and try to prevent and block us from having any type of real opposition to the Yahweh, Messiah, Torah prophecy conspiracy.
Communist, that's godless.
The Nazi, well, World War II was a pagan war, right? I mean, Nazi Germany was a post-Christian society. The Soviet Union was a post-Christian society. These were.
Nietzsche's primary argument against Christianity was that it was, in some ways, too
Nazis were pagan?
equated people. I think Nazis were pagan.
Yeah, Nazis were absolutely pagan. So Nazis were honest enough, like the Marquis de Sade, right, to say, if we're going to reject Christianity, then the Christian morality has got to go. There's no basis to treat people as though they have inherent dignity.
If you don't want to reject worship a Jew and believe in magical Jewish covenants, you can't be a Christian, period.
And worth. Let's just liquidate all these people.
But they tried to keep the trappings. They liked some of the trappings of Christianity, but they took Christ, quite literally took Christ out of the
And
Christianity.
didn't they go after the communists that's godless?
The Nazis were their god was sort of the pagan Volk, right? This very clearly hearkening back to a pre-Christian, even in their aesthetics, right?
It was Nordic,
You know, there's no sense in which the Nazis were a manifestation of Christian cosmology, right? This was very clearly post-Christian, and so when I say post-Christian, and the reason I say the Nazis were at least honest about it is that if you get rid of the Christian claims, you eventually have to get rid of the Christian morality too. So I mentioned the Marquis de Sade. During the Enlightenment, there was this rejection, overt rejection of Christianity, and specifically attacks against the Catholic Church. The Marquis de Sade said, well, not only should we attack Christianity, but we should sweep away Christian morality as well. There's no reason why the strong should, scrape and bow before the weak. That's against nature.
I've heard this one.
Yeah, that's what Marquis said. That's what Nietzsche said. That's what
This is Wagner?
the Nazis said, right?
Oh, it's right of the
and that
Valkyries,
is
of
what
course.
pagan society, that's the principle in which pagan societies had always been organized. And what I'm saying is that Christian civilization was organized on different principles, never fully realized, right? Ideals that we are always moving toward, never quite going to achieve, because this is the world and we're fallen, people are what they are. But the ideal and the claim, the ontological claim about what people.
Hail post-Christianity. I know. We need a post-Christian world.
Last word, Brian?
No,
I'm sick of the Judeo era dominating society.
If the U.S. is held up as the example, as the most Christian nation, that doesn't bode well for linking nationalism and Christianity, just based on our behavior over the last 200 years.
Yeah. Christian nationalism. Good luck. Himmler exalts the pagan Germanic stone graves in official SS training booklet. Pagan Germanic stone graves? You mean not crosses? Here's Rabbi explaining that Hitler and the Germans wanted to replace Christianity with pre-Christian paganism, which, by the way, the rabbis celebrate that Christianity conquered paganism. Endless clips of rabbis celebrating that Jesus conquered paganism through Christianity and Islam and Judaized the world. And they view Ishmael and Esau, Christianity and Islam, as more Noahide compliant and closer to Judaism and preferred to over paganism. They call anybody that doesn't believe in the Torah and opposes the Torah prophecy Yahweh Messiah agenda is Amalek, the ultimate enemy.
Eventual belief in a single. There are some movements to replace Christianity with the old pre-Christian paganism of that European countries had. In fact, that already started with Nazism. Although Nazism was officially allied with Christianity, it essentially was a pagan movement. It was connecting to old German symbols. The Rambam talks about the positive role of Christianity in the world. I don't know why the Christians would censor it. It's actually a positive statement, but okay.
The Christians censored Maimonides' statement that Christianity was a positive thing in the world and brought benefit to Judaism, because they didn't want it out. They wanted you to think that nothing the Jews hate more than Christianity and Jesus. That's why they censored that passage.
The Rambam maintains that Christianity is idolatry. But the Rambam says it's an idolatry that was approaching monotheism. And the Rambam says this is part of God's divine plan to wean the world away from the decadence and immorality of paganism towards an eventual belief in a single God.
There you have it. Yahwehist for 50 says, thanks for the work you do. Me and my family love the show. Highly recommend reading Julian Jaynes' Bicameral Mind Theory. And if you don't already know, the Safaria app has the legend of Shimon Kepa. I do know they have that. I have a copy in a book as well. And I will copy and paste that name in that book. Thank you so much, Yahwehist. Yahwist for the 50. I hope you're not a Yahwehist. I doubt it. Okay, let's see. What do we have next? Let's see. F5. I know I have a clip too. Oh, here's another clip.
However, interestingly, when Hitler does sort of divulge, there are even a few times when Hitler does sort of divulge his anti-Christian attitude in his writings and speeches. So let me just give one example among many. In the second volume of Mein Kampf, after in the first volume you'd already said we need to be careful about criticizing Christianity. In the second
said, be careful about criticizing it. They know how Christians act. They were trying to manipulate them and slowly transition them away from it. Otherwise, they know the mob of Christians wouldn't go along with it. They were trying to have some political savvy. This is Forum of Christian Teachers.
volume, there is actually a passage where he does criticize Christianity. And I'll read you the passage here. It says, a philosophy filled with infernal intolerance, and here he's talking about Christianity, especially Catholicism, but he says a philosophy filled with infernal intolerance will only be broken by a new idea, driven forward by the same spirit, championed by the same mighty will, and at the same time pure and absolutely genuine in itself. The individual may establish with pain today that with the appearance of Christianity, the first spiritual terror entered into the far freer ancient world.
Hitler called Christianity a spiritual terror.
So here he calls Christianity the first spiritual terror to enter the freer ancient world. And then he goes on to say, but he will not be able to contest the fact that since then, the world has been afflicted and dominated by this coercion. Afflicted and dominated by Christianity.
Christianity spread by coercion. A Jewish lie created by Jews targeted Rome and the pagan world and spread through coercion. Spread the God of Israel, destroying all the pagan gods. And what has it led to? Modern Christianity.
And then he goes on to say that coercion is broken only by coercion, and terror only by terror. So he's actually promising he's going to persecute the church here. I'm going to use terror and coercion to break the coercion of the church.
Okay, Christianity had first to destroy the pagan altars. It may be objected here that in these phenomena, Christianity, which we find throughout the history of the world, we have to recognize mostly as specifically Jewish mode of thought, and that such fanaticism and intolerance are typically symptoms of the Jewish mentality. This may be true 1,000 times over, and we may regret that it is so, and note with the feeling of uneasiness that with this phenomenon has hitherto been unknown in the history of mankind. Each one of us today may regret the fact that the advent of Christianity was the first occasion on which spiritual terror was introduced into the much freer ancient world. But in fact cannot be denied that ever since the advent of Christianity, the world has been pervaded and dominated by this kind of coercion, and that violence is broken only by violence and terrorism by terrorism. Is that the whole quote?
The reason, of course, they say he was a Christian was because there were a number of occasions, and one of the most commonly quoted one comes from an April 1922 speech of Hitler, where Hitler called Jesus his Lord and Savior. You have in the Nazi 25-point program their claim that they were representative positive Christianity. So there were some things where Hitler was trying to bring himself close to Christianity. But if you look at all of his private conversations, if you look at his testimony of all of his associates, none of his associates who've written anything either in their diaries, and we do have some diaries of people who were written at the time, as well as subsequently, none of them claim that he was Christian. And in fact, they argue exactly the opposite. They claim he was anti-Christian. And even in public, there in Mein Kampf and in some speeches, Hitler makes anti-Christian comments at a number of times too. So it seems to me there's overwhelming evidence that he was more anti-Christian than Christian. The reason, of course, they say he was a Christian.
I've been seeing this claim on TikTok a lot lately. They say that before the National Socialists called themselves that, they called themselves the Christian Nationalist, and they used crosses before they used the swastika. But there's no sources for this. That's because it's made up out of thin air. Not only were the National Socialists not Christian, but they were actively anti-Christian. Now for this topic, I really recommend checking out Richard Weikart's book, Hitler's Religion. It completely debunks any claims that the National Socialists and their leaders were Christian. And the publisher has many other good books, some of which are related to this topic as well. But before we get into that book, we're going to check out some primary source documents. These are all real internal documents from the National Socialist German Workers' Party. If we translate this document, we see it says that the clergy class were not allowed to join the party. That doesn't sound very Christian to me. Clergy and other comrades who have strong religious ties cannot be accepted into the party.
People with Christians were not accepted into the party.
That doesn't sound like a Christian nationalist party.
1939.
Here's another internal document from June 1941. If we translate it, we see the head of the party office stated National Socialist and Christian views are incompatible. And this is absolutely right. In the book, The Persecution of the Catholic Church in the Third Reich, the author gives us a ton of examples of anti-Christianity. He cites poems that were published in National Socialist newspapers, poems which were attacking the Pope. He cites documents showing that the National Socialist Teachers Union wanted to abolish Bible teaching. They wanted to completely remove Christianity from the schools. They believed that teaching Christianity in the schools and teaching Christ's words were offensive. And more internal documents show us that they removed crucifixes from the schools and replaced them with pictures of their leader. Places like the New York Times, we can find countless newspaper clippings about how they were shutting down private schools. And most of these private schools were Christian schools. They were targeting not only Catholic schools, but also Protestant ones. Weikart documents these occurrences in his aforementioned book, and he points out that the leader himself endorsed removing the crucifixes. Not only that, but he endorsed laws that would replace all religious schools with public schools, and put out propaganda posters saying, Hitler's youth go to public school. And these types of policies were not just limited to the schools. They wanted to do this to the churches themselves. This is from William Shire's history book, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. He documents how they put out a 30-point program for the National Reich Church. This church would control all of the churches in Germany, and they would do things like remove all pastors.
So I see in the chat you're saying he got all that from the Telegram group NS Heathenry. Should have gave some credit. We're not even going to watch him anymore if he's not giving them credit. All right, here's funeral of General Ludendorff. He was the general, the top guy in Germany before Hitler. There's Hitler at his pagan, not Christian, major state funeral, it appears. Okay. So General Ludendorff, let's hear what he had to say. There's some quotes from him now. He said, "The rejection of Christianity is stringent anti-Semitism. Jew and Freemason both know that the Christian world religion is paving the way for Jewish world domination." Hear that? Jews and Freemasons know that the Christianity is paving the way for Jewish world domination. Then it is Christianity which allows them to shape the worldview of the Goyim in such a way that they come to accept them as the chosen people. Whether you believe that they're not chosen anymore in replacement theology or not, if you believe that they were ever chosen, that's too much. By their own God, Jehovah. The Germans must come to the realization that Christianity as a world religion was devised by Jews in order to achieve the objectives of their ancestral religion. General Ludendorff. And he was like the predecessor to Hitler, right? He was Hitler's mentor or something, I believe. Here's more. His refutation of Aryan Christianity, so the Christian identity people. The supposed heroic nature of his death, which the representatives of Aryan Christianity always cite, has been put into the right light by my wife in her aforementioned work, Redemption of Jesus Christ. Man, his wife was even doing anti-Christian books? Based, a hero who dies for his worldview does not say the words, my God, why have you forsaken me? Or, Father, all things are impossible for you. Lift this cup up from me. Jesus knew that only through his death, his task on earth, the redemption of mankind, was fulfilled, and he knew the glory that awaited him at the side of Yahweh, his Father. Hopefully, he was not as mistaken in this as he was with the prophecy of his return during the lifetime of his disciples. Burn. Which, however, would always be very embarrassing for Yahweh's Son. Jesus himself repeatedly confessed to the Jewish law and to his Father Yahweh, the national God of the Jews. Another Ludendorff. The attempts to create any kind of divide between Judaism and Christianity and to spread the untruth that the Jews crucified the quote-unquote Aryan Jesus should really stop at last. Yes, please, LARPers and liars online, stop denying that Christianity came from Judaism. Stop denying that Christianity is Messianic apocalyptic Judaism, universalized for the Gentiles. This morning I woke up on Twitter to popular viral coping tweets saying, Christianity has nothing to do with Judeo. Judeo-Christianity is an oxymoron. No. The attempts to create any kind of divide between Judaism and Christianity needs to stop. It's Jewish. Yeah, Christianity is the real Messianic Judaism. J. Dyer quote. It was Jewish sects that crucified a Jewish sectarian. They go, but the Jews killed him, and he called the Jews bad. That doesn't make them not Jewish. It's still Jewish. Jewish infighting. If indeed the crucifixion of the Jew Jesus is based on any historical fact, which it is not. It's purely symbolic, mythological, based on Scripture. Another Ludendorff. Jesus was an enemy of the Jews and was crucified by the Jews as an enemy in the story. Yes, there is nothing stupider. According to this theory, all German-blooded witches and all German-blooded priests and judges who sentence these witches to death by fire must not have been German. Nothing rages more fanatically against one's own blood than one sect against another of the same people. Jewish infighting. We know well enough from the whole... That's why it's a controlled Judeo-dialectic, because it's two Jewish sects arguing over who the Messiah is. Nothing rages more fanatically against one's own blood than one sect against another of the same people. We know well enough from the Holy Scriptures, quote-unquote Holy Scripture, what sectarian strife prevailed in the Jewish people. And we also know well enough with what tremendous cruelty, example in the Old Testament, Jews raged against Jews, and Yahweh also punished Jews. The statement that Jesus could not be a Jew because he supposed enmity against this or that Jewish sect or their hatred of him is also silly and completely nonsensical. Would the Christians online pay attention, please? Another Ludendorff from Forbidden One, who also does a lot of great research in these important quotes. Quote from Ludendorff: "If anyone doesn't want to hear anything Jewish or receive anything from a Jew, let Jesus go." Lost my footrest. Shoot, nonsensical. This is so powerful too. Christians, if you don't want to worship a Jew and you don't want to have a Jewish religion, let Jesus go. He's a fake Jewish fairy tale. All right, we're going to get to a couple super chats here. I think we're done with the Ludendorffs. Troggy Trog for 25 says, great topic and stream to start off 2025. Hail, Adam. I'm learning a lot. I think it's their statements and their perception of Christianity, I think, is very insightful. John Garadas says, Adam, any background music on your stream besides the intro is very distracting. Could you and See Through It All contact Giuliani? Our man doesn't know how to sync his videos from Odyssey to Rumble. Have a great stream to all of you. Thank you, John. John again. Oh, wait. Odinic, what weird word. Keep up the good work, Adam. Thank you. Nazi Dice says, the thrift shop didn't have it, nor did my local library, so I ordered The Darkening Age yesterday. Shipped this morning. I'm ready to be pissed off at Nick Fuentes' Wet Dream. Thanks again for the recommendation. Keep up the fantastic work. Thank you. Bloodstain says, egg price headlines. It's Kabbalistic signaling. Okay. Archie says, I just got an email from Odyssey saying that my subscription to your channel is about to be renewed. I guess that isn't going to last long because of the situation with Stripe. Can you watch Entropy for donos? You don't have to stream to it. Entropy has been very reliable. I may have to do that, but if they're renewing your membership, your subscription, it's probably going to carry over. I hope it carries over. I actually tweeted at them today asking if the subscriptions in Odyssey are going to carry over to the new payment system. But I don't know the answer. I hope they do. Okay. Drum and Bass World says, wait, what? You mean to tell me that history's most well-known anti-Semites didn't want to worship a Jewish rabbi? Shocking, I know. Can you believe it? Last German TV says, greetings from Germany. Can't wait for your book. I hope it will be legal to ship it to Europe. Should be. Once it is possible to top up my Odyssey wallet with Bitcoin again, I will donate more. Thank you. Warp Speed Judah says, happy Fred Arthur Luchter Jr. Day, Adam. Don't know who that is. Valentine Lagoyette says, knowing how Christians always lied as they do today, imagine they were the ones who took care not only of writing down history for millennia, but of copying and preserving ancient Europe's history. Makes you wonder how much of everything is fake. Guiano comes in real interesting here. Volga German says shekels for my nigga Adam. GoldenEye says newer fan here. Been enjoying your work for the past few months, especially your stream with Keith and Spencer. Keep up the great work. Thank you. Nazi Dice says even the positive Christianity they started was just basically the Bible with all the Jewish prophets' names replaced with European pagan gods. It was just another way to wean Germany off of Christianity. They were phasing it out. We're going to show more material. They were undoubtedly phasing it out. Watch the Collapse says, without Christianity, the birth rate will plummet, says Fuentes the Virgin. Right. Nazi Dice says, I like Wagner playing, but I'm a musician with a doctorate degree in orchestral composition from Juilliard. Are you really? I like the background. It's a good touch. You can't just hear my voice ranting and yelling for 2 hours straight. All right. Now, thank you everybody for the support. Oh, $80 from Indomitably Base says loving the Wagner music. I think so too. Hitler describes Christianity as serving the Jewish agenda by validating their messianic end times prophecies. We've already read that one. Okay, now we're going to get in a few tabs of Kurt Eggers' quote. Am I pronouncing that one right? Eggers? Kurt Eggers? I think it's Eggers. State endorsement of anti-Christian figures. And he was the infamous editor of the SS newspaper, had an entire formation named after him, the SS something Eggers, which bore his name on their uniforms. So establishing that he's one of their top guys. The significance here is that Eggers was one of the most prolific anti-Christian thinkers within National Socialism. If it were true that the NSDAP were a Christian movement, why did Kurt receive such recognition and endorsement? Noteworthy anti-Christian writings from Kurt Eggers. Give the Bible back to the Jews. The Germans don't need it. Really? No one should take us by the hand to lead us to Yahweh, with whom sit the fathers of the Jews, and the prophets and messiahs. We want to stay in Germany. Let us give the Bible of the pious back to the Jews. Yeah, what's with the wanting to be a Jew, wanting to have the Jewish birthright and covenant, wanting to be grafted into the Jews, wanting to be the adopted fellow heirs with the Jews? How about enough of the wanting to be the true Israel? How about we want to give that to them? We want to be the true Europe. Right? See through it all? How about that? How about enough of the wanting to be a Jew? Another one from Forbidden One and Eggers. The Lord of Sinai spread the dogma that he created the world in 6 days out of nothing, through his word alone. How much greater is the world of belief in the Nordic region, which saw in Odin the bearer of all-pervading, all-animating law. Odin once gave the law to his fermenting chaos, and through this came meaning and essence into the world. This is what the old man taught the young man, to give him reverence for the universe and the duty of his humanity. But they didn't take it literally. There lived the strong man of his deed, which itself is creation. There was no need for God to speak Hebrew from the burning bush and give instructions to his chosen Jewish people, that they were intended to be binding for the entire non-Jewish world. Yeah, believing that the Jews were ever chosen or believing the Hebrew Torah scriptures as the word of God is making them gods. I'm not an atheist, I'm agnostic, but if anybody's claiming to speak for God or that they have the authority of God or they're God's chosen people, they're bullshitting you, they're lying to themselves, they're lying to you. And if you believe it, you've fallen for the trap and you've made them God and you've given them authority. Anybody claiming that they can speak for God is trying to control you. Another Eggers. And how shameful is the fact that Christians of Germany nationality admiringly parrot the Bible stories of the desert wanderers of the Jews, disguised with lies and embellishments. Shameful. In fact, shameful. That was 1938. Under the Theodoric the Great launched the first counterattack against the onslaught of Yahwehistic desert thinking. The kingdom of this world prepared to storm the heavens of Sinai. Prometheus and Lucifer, Odin and Baldur raced against Yahweh, Moses, and the prophets, and the Messiah and his representatives. A marvelous picture of the uprising, a flaming signal of attack which the warlike forefather presented in his last hour of ancient pagan humanity, which was also the first hour of the first great Germanic empire of the world. The Pope turned pale, the cross swayed, and Yahweh covered his head in the clouds of Sinai. He's talking a lot of God stuff. Kurt Eggers on criticizing Luther's anti-Semitism. So their critique of Christian anti-Semitism. It's not true. It makes critics look silly, and it's discrediting. It gives Jews the victim status. It's missing the mark, missing the forest through the trees. Christians' main problem with Jews is that they rejected the Messiah that was meant to conquer the world. Who cares? If that's your problem, our problem should be that they want their Messiah to conquer the world, and that they claim that they're chosen to be above the nations in these things. That should be the problem, not that they rejected that Messiah. Total controlled opposition. Let's hear what he had to say about Christian anti-Semitism. Martin Luther saw the pernicious behavior of interest, usury, which the Jews regarded as their trade. Like hardly any other man of his time, he denounces the Jews in harsh terms as spirits of lies and treachery. And yet his anti-Semitism is very superficial. I always say the same thing. Their opposition to Jews is superficial. If you worship their God, believe their Torah, and believe that they were ever chosen, your opposition is only on a superficial, controlled paradigm level. For through baptism as true repentance, the Jew can be accepted into the community of the saints. And the Old Testament with Moses, the archfathers, and the prophets is for him a fountain of pure closeness to God. For him the voice of Yahweh, which drools from the desert into the world, is the only valid law against which the sowing of man is the devil's yarn. Another from Eggers, brought to us by Forbidden One. The Messiah of the Jews must be a full Jew. Yeah, you can't, these Christians denying that Jesus was Jewish. You can't be the Jewish Messiah and be rejected, the Messiah of the Jews rejected by the Jews, and not be Jewish.
Everything would suddenly stop. No matter your industry, Granger's here for you.
Sorry, we got an ad coming. The Messiah of the Jews must be a full Jew. It is therefore natural that he should be circumcised in his childhood as a sign that he belongs. Sorry, I had to turn the music back on. Oh, man. Circumcised in his childhood as a sign that he belongs to the covenant of Yahweh. Yeah, it was only Jews that were circumcising their boys on the 8th day according to Jewish law, but he's not a Jew. Okay, sure. The cult of Jesus' foreskin, as practiced by the church to this day, is characteristic of the conscious continuation of the covenant of Yahweh in Christianity. How could an Arian... Hold on, it's a little quiet now. How could an Arian, even with the best will in the world, have placed himself in the Jewish tradition? Because this Jewish tradition has always been sealed to foreign races. But now there are people who are waging a hopeless battle for a subsequent Aryanization of Jesus from the tribe of David. Criticizing the Christians in denial that Jesus was Jewish and trying to make him a white, blonde-haired Aryan. A useless cause. And you know what's interesting is before I even was made aware of all of these quotes, I was already experiencing and thinking the exact same things about Christianity from my own experiences. It's so vindicating. Editor-in-chief of the official newspaper debunking the Aryan Jesus. Oh, wait, we just read that one. Oh, here's a good one from Eggers again. Just how little Paul was actually interested in the historical Jesus can be seen from the fact that he regarded him, who he had never seen, but only pursued as a principle, as a new creator from the beginning of his quote-unquote conversion. That is, from his sudden realization of the tremendous significance that the mythical Christ could have for the whole non-Jewish world. So insightful. Paul never talks about a historical Jesus. He never knew a historical Jesus. He only adamantly argues that he explicitly saw him in the scriptures. Never talks about the virgin birth, Mother Mary, betrayed by Judas, never describes an earthly preacher at all. And not just Paul, Hebrews doesn't, 1st and 2nd Peter don't, James doesn't. Even Barnabas doesn't. Jude doesn't. All the earliest layers of Christianity before the Gospels don't describe an earthly figure at all. He's a cosmic, celestial, heavenly high priest, mythical. He knows it's mythical, and he knows that Saul the Pharisee realized the tremendous significance that this mythical Jesus could have to theologically conquer the whole non-Jewish world. Think of all the Christian anti-Semites online constantly lying and saying, I'm Jewish, and that we're all Jews, and we're a Jewish psyop, and it's Jewish to say these things about Christianity, while they admire the Germans, and the Germans were saying all of this. Whoever becomes a Christian dies as an old man, as the first Adam, in order to rise with Christ as a new man, as the second Adam. That is why Christianity is a new race, a separate race, for which not the blood but the indwelling Christ is binding, for which there is no clan and no homeland, but only the kingdom of Yahweh. Thus, those who are not Jews by blood can nevertheless become members of spiritual Israel. And men who are not. So to want to be a spiritual Israel, to want to have the Jewish covenant, is to elevate their covenant and put it on a pedestal and legitimize it. And men who are not circumcised as Jews by the flesh can be circumcised by baptism in the Spirit, and thus also by heirs of the promise of Yahweh and his covenant. Like, it's not it. We're just over a third of the way through of the information. Look at the type of thing that Christians say. This is from a documentary. Look at what the thing Christians say about Germany.
During World War II, Hitler established an occult ministry in the Third Reich to use satanic rituals against the Jews and the rest of the world. But the material destruction throughout Europe pales in comparison to the human and moral costs of the Holocaust.
Hear what the Christian documentary says? Hitler was a Nazi, occultist, pagan, satanic, Luciferian, blah, 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 blah. You mean he didn't worship the Jews? Anything that's not bowing down to the God of the Jews is satanic and antichrist and occult and evil, according to these Jews.
During World War II, Hitler established an occult ministry in the Third Reich to use satanic rituals against the Jews and the rest of the world. But the material destruction throughout Europe pales in comparison to the human and moral costs of the Holocaust.
See, that's what Alex Jones always says. Oh, satanic rituals. They're doing satanic rituals. Alfred Rosenberg, this is from The Forbidden One, also spoke of Paul as being a Jewish agent, and he was another high-level Nazi, spoke of Paul as being a Jewish agent in spreading Jewish theology through Christianity, the heathens. Nazi literature in the 1930s and 1940s ascribed this accusation that Paul was working for Jewish interests. Rosenberg writes, in The Myth of the 20th Century, we read this one already. Paul preached the international revolution against the Roman Empire. The Messiah was meant to conquer Edom, they viewed as Rome, and meant to conquer the Gentiles, and they created Christianity, and after a few centuries, the God of Israel theologically conquered the pagan world, and then co-opted and hijacked the Roman Empire to spread by the sword the belief in the God of Israel. Paul served a Jewish cause. Okay, we read that one already. Now here is Third Reich publication in 1944. Quote, "The world historical mission of Christianity is to fill the pagan world with the spirit of Judaism." So obvious, so eloquently stated, so true. Christianity's goal is to fill the pagan world with the spirit of Judaism. That's what it is. They are branches of Judaism imposing the Jewish Messiah on the world. Guys, I'm going to play a video real quick. I have to step away. So I'm going to turn down the music. This is from a documentary. I can't remember the name of it, but I recorded it a while back. And it's all about positive Christianity and Christianity in Germany.
A few months after the election of Hitler as Germany's chancellor, the Deutsche Christen rose to its height of popularity and power. They embodied a belief in Germany's military strength, a manly Christianity, and an intense hatred of Jews and of Jewish influences in Germany's church.
As the Deutsche Christen coalesced as a movement, they included many pastors, they included theologians, professors at universities. They had a goal of propagating their point of view, and there are therefore many publications which begin to present this point of view of these German Christians. The anti-Semitism, the nature of a newly established or a newly understood Christian message. And this can be found in pamphlets, it can be found in lectures, it can be found in publications of all sorts, and it can be found in a particular journal called The Gospel of the Third Reich. This series of publications can be seen now to show the arguments by which Deutsche Christen tried to convert Christianity into a doctrine that was perfectly acceptable in the Nazi state, or that could fit comfortably in the Nazi state. The Deutsche Christen were very interested in obedience and loyalty. They were very opposed to a democratic state. They were very interested in national unity. But above all, the Deutsche Christen had to try to describe what it meant to be a Christian in a nation where everything Jewish was held to be unacceptable. And this, of course, created a huge problem for the Deutsche Christen, because anyone who looks with any degree of awareness at the Christian tradition recognizes that it is deeply rooted in the Jewish faith and the Jewish tradition.
Matters in the German evangelical church today reached a serious pass. There had been signs last week of action, less by the new Reich Church authorities than by...
At this rally, the building was, at least in all accounts, described as full, so it was an enormous crowd of people. And the main speaker, one of the main speakers, was a high school teacher named Reinhold Krause. He gave a speech that talked particularly about the need to purge Christianity of its Jewish elements. And his speech used very sort of crude and direct language. For example, Krause said, "If we in Germany refuse even to buy a tie from a Jew, how can we accept a religion that comes to us from the Jews?"
Good
question. He talked about, we need to free ourselves of the theology of cattle dealers and pimps, of the Rabbi Paul. Krause made these statements about the need to remove the Old Testament, the need to sing hymns that were in German, that did not celebrate places like Jerusalem, but rather the holy sites of German suffering, to create a heroic fighting form of Christianity, to worship, as he said, in our own German language, because only in that language can we express the truth of the German soul. So Krause's speech important for a number of reasons. One was for the very clear, even crude way in which he expressed what a de-Judaized Christianity would look like. The other for the extremely public forum in which he did so. A very large audience, an audience that responded with enthusiastic applause. All accounts of the speech repeat that.
In the New Testament, in the book of Acts, baptism has the function of breaking down racial barriers. What's happening is the Holy Spirit is converting people who are Gentiles. The church was initially Jewish, and it's converting Gentiles. You got an Ethiopian eunuch, and so forth. And they're coming in, they're being baptized. What was happening was that baptism served the function of making people into followers of Jesus. You died to your old selfish self with Christ, and you're raised to live in Christ. So it was creating a church that was both Gentile and Jewish. That's the Christian story.
Niemöller and his supporters said that the Arian paragraph has no place in the church. And Niemöller also argued that the entire doctrine of baptism was undercut if Christians could be separated by race, so that if they took baptism seriously, according to Niemöller, then no Christians could be considered second-class Christians on the basis of race.
In a culture that's out to destroy everything Jewish, does the church cling to its roots, or does it seek to fit into the culture? The church was faced with a critical decision.
A Jew with a Bible
that are at odds with the prevailing culture, or re-examine those beliefs and reshape Christianity for a new day.
In the course of writing my book about Abraham Geiger and the Jewish Jesus, I also looked into the next generation, what happened after the turn of the 20th century to these ideas of Jesus' Jewishness. And what struck me was that increasingly Protestant theologians were talking about Jesus as a Galilean, as a Gentile, and even as an Arian. And that Arian argument, I discovered, began even before Hitler.
You hear this online. They'll say, Jesus was from Nazareth. He was a Galilean. He wasn't a Jew from Judea. He was a seed to be the Messiah. You have to be a descendant of David, the king of Judah from Judea. So by blood, by ancestry, he would have been a Judean. And then they say, because there's a verse in Isaiah that says something about Galilee of the nations. They say, oh, the nations were there. The Gentiles were there. Gentiles weren't circumcising on the 8th day and impressing the rabbis in the temple with his knowledge of the Hebrew scriptures. Gentiles were not doing that. And Galilee was predominantly Jewish. They lie about that also.
To power began already at the turn of the century, and it was popularized by Houston Stewart Chamberlain, published a book called Foundations of the 19th Century. It became a kind of bestseller at the beginning of the 20th century in Germany. It was read by the Kaiser, by theologians, by people who took it seriously and debated it. It was discussed in periodicals and so on. And that helped spread the notion that Jesus was Arian. Chamberlain says, in all probability, Jesus was an Arian. Probability. He doesn't say it definitively. He says probability. But there's something about propaganda.
It's funny. We were seeing the quotes we just read from Eggers and General Ludendorff saying, enough with this Arian Jesus shit. Just drop it all. Don't like twist it and lie and pretend like you're the real thing. Like it's a non-starter. It's a hopeless cause to try to remove the Jewishness from Jesus. You're left with nothing, and you're just lying, and it ain't gonna work.
That makes people more sympathetic when you say probability. If you ask someone, is it possible that Jesus was an Arian? Is it possible that he wasn't Jewish? This issue of de-Judaizing Christianity was raised by pastors. It was discussed. There were even popular books written about Jesus that said not only was he not Jewish, he was really German. Somehow these Aryans who were in Galilee were originally Germanic tribes, or they were originally from Iran, or they were originally from India. Whatever it was, they certainly weren't Jewish. And Jesus must have come from one of those populations.
All these mental gymnastics and all of these like elaborate theories, baseless theories, or you could just tell the truth and just say it's fake and Jewish and we don't need it.
Where was he born? Bethlehem? Well, it turns out there is another tiny village also named Bethlehem up in the north in the Galilee.
And it just serves as controlled opposition. Apparently the Christian identity, Jesus wasn't Jewish copers have been around for over 70 years. And have they been effective? Has that talking point been successful at all? No, 99.99% of everybody in the world knows Jesus is Jewish. No doubt about it. Not even really up for debate in any serious way. It's not going to work. It's dead on arrival.
So perhaps that's where he was born. He wasn't born in the Bethlehem near Jerusalem.
Speculations about Jesus and his origins were nothing new. But the Third Reich offered those speculations an official credibility never before experienced.
With some dismay that I discovered in a library in Berlin at the Center for the Study of Anti-Semitism, some volumes of articles by prominent theologians published during World War II. I wondered, what were these theologians writing about? And I pulled these volumes off the shelf in the library and I started thumbing through, and it was sheer anti-Semitic propaganda. And I noticed that these books were published by the Institute for the Study and Eradication of Jewish Influence on German Church Life.
Huh.
And I wondered about that institute. What was it? Who was involved? And I looked at this massive historiography about the churches in Nazi Germany. You know, there are just thousands of books written about it. One book had one footnote that mentioned this institute. That's it. And I asked around some prominent scholars. Nobody knew. And then I went to Thuringia, which is where this institute had been located, which is right in the geographic center of Germany, to the town of Eisenach, where the church archives for Thuringia are located. It was a very spooky experience for me because so much of what I had studied about this institute that existed from 1939 to 1945, so much of it was still there. The hotel where they had held meetings was still there and really didn't look at all changed. And there was something very unpleasant for me about holding these documents in my hands. And the first time I was at that archive and actually held documents from this institute that wanted to eradicate Judaism, I actually broke out in hives from head to toe.
The institute was led by Walter Grundmann, one of the 20th century's most famous Bible scholars. Grundmann was a friend and colleague of Gerhard Kittel, editor of the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, and had written many articles for it.
That they have. This is also an important fact: is that the Germans were some of like the best biblical critical scholars in scholarship. This is well known, and the fact that they were studying Christianity and the Bible and coming to all these same conclusions, just more vindication.
6 years after the fiery, unpopular speech in the Berlin Sports Palace, its main points were being carried out. The project of removing all Jewish references from the New Testament and the German Protestant hymnal had begun.
You're not going to be left with much.
The Institute for the Study and Eradication of Jewish Influence on German Church Life located itself in the town of Eisenach, home of Wartburg Castle and of Martin Luther's project of translating the Bible into German. The imagery was clear. As Luther had translated the Bible for his own historical situation, Walter Grundmann and his institute were translating it for theirs.
One thing he did, which was widespread among such folks, was to limit the gospel to private life, individual life, and to say what happens in society is up to the Führer, Hitler, and that the gospel doesn't speak to that. And that therefore the gospel needs to be made friendly to German sensibilities. And so you take out the Jewish stuff and you make it really German, Germanism, nationalistic, and so forth.
All right. Did we read this one already? No, this is Third Reich publication on Jewish scripture of Old Testament and New Testament. And then I'll get to the super chats after we read this one. After all that has been said here about the content of the Holy Scriptures and quotes of the Old and New Testaments, one must agree with the judgmental of Obenmeister, who writes in his Enlightenment book, The Unveiled Bible. The scribes who composed the Bible were erring people, afflicted with errors and ambiguities. Mystery and parable, dark sayings and concealment of the true meaning are the rhyme of the Testaments, both Old and New. To present this system of deliberate concealment and distortion, furthermore distorted by countless errors in translation and by unauthorized additions by the Church, this whole ornate edifice of rabbinical patristic grotesquerie as the pure, clear, and unadulterated word of God is, to put it mildly, somewhat audacious. Yeah, that is putting it mildly. It was a cruel revenge of the Jewish rabbis who knew better than the Christian theologians what their Pentateuch meant when they imposed it as the prologue of Christianity. All right, where do we leave off? Nazi Dice says, yes, I am sadly being a music doctor doesn't pay as well as being a surgeon. Music doctor? Larry von Twinkletoe says, the Nazis' tool society was ran by an occultist-trained Turkish Freemason Jews named Rudolf von Seddendorf. Hitler received training in rhetoric by the Jewish mystic Erich Jan Hanessen. I'd be very cautious suggesting the NSDAP weren't being controlled by Jews. They handed... Have I even said that today, though? I haven't suggested that. But the Jews, in regards to kicking off the yoke of Christianity, that's not what Jews wanted. We're going to show you the news articles of the rabbis and the Catholics kvetching about it. In fact, they're the most villainized people in all of history, probably because they were getting rid of Christianity and going back to pagan, Germanic paganism. They handed Palestine to the Jews. Yeah, I've heard that argument. And definitely what played out, the Jews were able to take advantage of the victimhood and the justification for the creation of Israel. But they were also working on that before the war broke out. Let's see. Odin says, great work. Thank you, Volkish Spirit and Forbidden One. This stream is a massive improvement over ETLB. I don't know what that is. Or whatever other BitChute videos made by the fringe Christian identity schizos that don't get anywhere. I know, I agree. Optics Prime says, great documentary on the origin of the swastika. Okay. Nazi Dice says, rabbis were literally crying in the streets of Germany as the Natsocks were getting rid of Christianity. That's all you need to know about how much Jews hate Jesus. Yeah, we have some information on that coming up here in a second as well. Only 7 days ago. Oh, Survive the Jive did the ancient swastika. Yeah, I saw him post that. Might have to do a show with him. He's like a pagan, anti-Christian dude, I believe. He follows me on Twitter as of recently. Okay, Volkish Spirit has a response to that. Jan Hanessen was indeed killed. Something they like to admit. Okay, interesting. So that guy that you said was Hitler's handler or whatever was killed by the Nazis. Interesting. Golden One doesn't follow me and ignores me. I don't know. I think he's scared to offend Christian friends and followers. It's the case with a lot of people. All right. Now, German Protestant theologian in the Third Reich, Grundmann, in 1941, says, quote, our Volk, which stands in a struggle above all else against the satanic powers of world Jewry for the order and life of this world, dismisses Jesus because it cannot struggle against the Jews and open its heart to the King of the Jews. And this is a response to the Aryan Jesus, the Christian theologians, and the Bible in Nazi Germany. I mean, is that not just a total fact? You cannot be in a struggle against the Jews while worshiping the King of the Jews and the God of the Jews. And yes, it is the God of the Jews. Paul says explicitly, first to the Jews, then the Gentiles. Is he the God of the Jews only? No, of the God of the Gentiles too. The only people that believed in this God and these scriptures and prophecies were known as the Jews, hundreds of years before Christianity. He also says, a German faith cannot be based on Paul because it would then be deformed through his Jewish system of coordinates, and the necessary Germanic foundations would not be able to come into effect. Stryker told Gustav Gilbert that the Christ story didn't inspire or move him. Isn't he the leader of, he was like the leader of one of the newspapers, the Stormer, right? All that stuff about Christ, the Jew who was the Son of God, I don't know. It sounds like propaganda. Sounds like Jewish propaganda. That pretty much sums it up. Okay, hold on. Need More Amalek says he is not afraid. He is very busy with kids and working out. He never answers me or anyone really. He shares your view of Christianity mostly, to my knowledge. You're talking about Golden One? Well, why doesn't he follow me on Twitter then? I see he doesn't follow very many people. I think I asked him once to do a show too, and he didn't respond. So whatever. I don't have anything against the guy. He's a base Chad Viking dude, so he sells wool. I like wool. Okay, Volkish Spirit again. Official and compulsory NSDAP ideological publication for the Hitler Youth. It, quote, it borders on treason to speak of the Jewish people as the chosen people in a state that regards Jews as hostile and alien to the people. And not just that they're still chosen, but they're ever chosen. And that was in 1935. Another official NSDAP ideological book for military officers on the Old Testament and Yahweh as a conspiracy. In 1944, Why Are We Fighting?, which Hitler personally endorsed as an instructional tool to inculcate the National Socialist worldview into German soldiers. Here are some various excerpts connecting the Old Testament Torah to the international Jewish conspiracy. The striving for world domination was prescribed by religious laws in the Old Testament. True. The leitmotif of the Old Testament appears again and again and still applies today. The doctrine of, quote unquote, the chosen people of God, of the domination of all peoples, in the name of God, of the filiation of God. The very idea of being God's called people always had to give Judaism great impetus. In any case, the form of religious and political faith laid down the laws of Moses in the whole of the Old Testament to allow Judaism to resist a whole world for millennia and make it almost imperishable. We read that one. Did we read all of these before? I think we did. The sayings scripture listed here breathe genuine Jewish spirit. They are aimed at two things: the election of the Jews by their God Yahweh and Jewish world domination. Read the Old Testament, especially the books of Moses, the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. One will discover what clearly defined laws of life and blood the Jew received there. All right, we need the music back on. Where's the music? The mission of the Annenerberb. What is that? Annenerberby. Okay, sorry guys, I have no idea. The SS Center for Research. Okay, quote, rediscover and reawaken our pre-Christian ancestors' worldview and to create from it a guide to our own existence. They said the pre-Christian Germanness as the original image of our vision of the world, universe of National Socialist values, a fundamental reevaluation of nearly all past centuries. So clearly, if the SS Center Research is saying that they're moving away from Christianity, E. Michael Jones shares this video of a Hitler speech where he says that he would vernichten, exterminate any priest who engage in what he called political activity. It cannot be sympathy or pity for persecuted servants of God that has mobilized the interest of the democratic citizens towards some priests in Germany who have come into conflict with the law. Rather, they're only interested in them as German enemies of the state. So he called priests enemies of the state. And they note the following on this topic: we shall protect the German priest as a servant of God, but we shall destroy the priest who is a political foe of the German Reich. So anybody that didn't get in line, hear a little bit of, because he's not yelling.
Sondern es ist das Interesse am deutschen Staatsfeind. Hier aber mag man eins zur Kenntnis nehmen. Den deutschen Priester als Diener Gottes werden wir beschützen. Den Priester als politischen Feind des Deutschen Reiches werden wir vernichten.
Priestess. Okay. Hitler relentlessly fighting Christianity. Excerpts. One must always remember in dealing with the German church situation that the dyed-in-the-wool Nazi regards the Christian religion as a Jewish product. It is therefore anathema to him. Why is there guys like Stu Peters and Ken O'Keefe and everybody, all these big names in alternative media going around everywhere, citing Europa the Last Battle and Greatest Story Never Told and wearing swastika cross necklaces? How come they're not telling you about all of this information of what their actual views towards Christianity were? Is this a psyop? Is this a cover-up? Do they want to cover up what they were actually saying? Yeah, Corey Mahler, also another one, the guy I'm debating on Friday. Not on this topic, although it might come up maybe. Yeah, Stu Peters says the National Socialists were hailing Christ every 2 seconds and building all these churches and shit. Hitler expressed, and this is from the San Pedro News Pilot, 1942, Hitler relentlessly fighting Christianity. Hitler, expressed the opinion that it takes about 1 generation until a people is weaned away from its former religious and political faiths. Then taking up religion specifically, he asserted, quote, every leading religion runs for about 2,000 years at the outside. After that, it has lost its appeal and something else takes its place. Since then, I have come to realize that Hitler must have been referring to his own plans for supplanting Christianity with his own religion of blood and soil. I like this song. All of these songs have been pretty good. Organized paganism versus Christianity. Let me know if it's too loud in the chat, guys. Organized paganism versus Christianity. Headline. The present war, World War II, is a struggle for survival between sharply contrasting civilizations. The free nations of the world, to a large degree, rest their case upon the Christian virtues which are opposed in the present struggle by the paganism of the Nazis. News headline: Christian clergymen condemn Nazi pagans. The Lutheran Church in Germany will fight Nazi paganism with all its power. In that fight, the entire Lutheran Church in this country will give its full support. Another headline: Nazi pagans gain new faith support. Attacks against Catholics and Jews reported. 1935. All of these are sourced, by the way. Follow Völkisch Spirit or the NS Heathenry, and they should provide all the links to the original sources here. A boom in activity in favor of the new pagan German faith movement coincided today with reports of new attacks on Catholics and Jews. Watch this. Oh, shoot, we don't have another headline. Headline: Arrest 700. Hold on. Is the music playing? Maybe that's too loud. I can't hear it, but I'm probably blowing your eardrums out. Here we go. Arrest. Breaking news on the wire. Arrest 700 pastors. Pagan Nazis blow at the church. Does that make it feel realistic? They arrested 700 pastors and the pagans blew up a church, apparently, in 1935. Morse code. Okay, here we go. From a letter of Pope Pius to the Bishop of Munster says, The letters that have reached us in recent months from the German episcopate give the impression that the year 1941 threatens to bring new, hard trials to the Catholic Church in your homeland. It is your and our greatest concern, all the greater because the de-Christianization of young people is taking place, under pressure against which parents and the Church are often almost defenseless. Chief of Army Equipment and Commander of the Replacement Army. Request for religious literature. The NSDAP increasingly restricted and controlled the distribution of Christian literature in the Wehrmacht in 1941. It is prohibited to request approved religious literature from other agencies or organizations. Okay, we'll skip that one. This is the logo that these accounts are using and the necklace of these things. Hitler's 1937 speech. This flag was banned by the NSDAP. Today, a news, and look, they make these posts and they get thousands and thousands of likes, way more likes than any of this information that Volkish Spirit post ever gets. The lies are spreading and going more viral amongst these lying Christian networks. Today, a new state is being established, the unique feature of which is that it sees its foundation not in Christianity and not in a concept of state. Rather, it places its primary emphasis on self-contained Volkisch Schmat. That's getting a little loud. All right. Heydrich, another top Nazi, quote, in agreement with the deputy of the Fuhrer, I once again request that any use of the swastika in connection with the Christian cross be avoided in the future. Christian universalism lacked any genuine religious function. It created no bond, for that alone is religion in the deepest and original sense between human reality and its essential being. On the contrary, its Christian universalism destroyed all essential, all national ties. This author, Beck, received a PhD in 1935 and was a prolific Nazi author. Wrote, Germanism as Christian Germanism, as some apostles of Judaism would still like to see it today, would be the most shameless betrayal of Germanism imaginable, since Christianity is nothing other than a form of Judaism. But there is no greater ethnic contrast than that between Germanism and Judaism. Official Dutch SS newspaper on the church being servants to the Jews, 1943. If that, I've been telling Volkisch Spirit he should write a book on all of this material. If that had happened and his Luther's warnings had been heeded, the European peoples would have been spared from much suffering. Instead, the servants of the church have completely handed us over to the Jews. Oh, if he only saw 2025. By always presenting them as God's chosen ones who are superior to us and must be pampered. He was saying this before Christian Zionism really exploded in America. Fortunately, this disgrace has been put to an end by the actions of the Fuhrer. The pseudo-pious lamentations about the Jews will no longer help. The eyes of the people are being opened more and more, and the fate of the Jews in Europe is decided. National Socialist propaganda depicted the biblical characters in their official propaganda movie in 1940 as swarthy Middle Easterners that have no resemblance to Europeans. Look a little European. Not a little swarthy. We get the point. Okay. Christianity is idealistic, dressed up Bolshevism. And I don't think we've shown any quotes from the table talks. They love to say, oh, those are debunked. That's fake. That's Jewish propaganda. We haven't cited the table talks once, right? It's almost like that's a red herring. Fire says, so what Hitler had Jewish teachers, the National Socialists were adamant on removing the influence of Jews, but they were not cartoon villains who denied anyone solely for having Jewish blood. There were Jews and multiple non-white ethnicities willing to fight the Soviet Union in the Wehrmacht. Right. John Garada says, great stream, Adam. Don't forget to contact Charlie to help him with getting more views. I'll talk to you about that, John. Nazi Dice, okay, we read that. Great support tonight, guys. We're going to keep going, too. We'll go 3 hours if we have to, as long as you guys want me to keep going. He says, so Hitler says, the heaviest blow that has struck mankind is Christianity. Bolshevism is the illegitimate son of Christianity. Both are a product of Jews. Christianity is the idealistically dressed up Bolshevism. The whole of Christianity is, this is Himmler, I am firmly convinced an erotic union of men for the erection of maintenance of this 2,000-year-old Bolshevism. So apparently the talking point to associate Christianity with Bolshevism had gone out. Here's the Goebbels diaries. Had a lot to say about Christianity. He says, afterwards, long discussions about the Vatican and Christianity. The Fuhrer is a fierce opponent of all that humbug, but he forbids me to leave the church for tactical reasons. And so for a decade now, I have paid my church taxes to support such rubbish. That is what hurts most. The Fuhrer has a lot of work to do. He is hatching 1,000 new plans. Mr. Churchill will be amazed. So Himmler tells me. Welcome back to the religious question again. The Fuhrer is deeply religious, though completely anti-Christian. He views Christianity as a symptom of decay. Rightly so, it is a branch of the Jewish race. This can be seen in the similarity of religious rites. Both Judaism and Christianity have no point of contact to the animal element, and thus, in the end, they will be destroyed. Hitler was a vegetarian on principle. I'm not for being a vegetarian, by the way. I think meat's important to our diet. His argument cannot be refuted on basis. Okay. The Fuhrer, so this is Goebbels' diary. He says, the Fuhrer is a man totally attuned to antiquity. He hates Christianity because it has crippled all that is noble in humanity. According to Schopenhauer, who we're going to read a quote from him about Christianity later, Christianity and syphilis have made humanity unhappy and unfree. Something about the crucified Christ. He rejects the idea of a church magazine for soldiers. I put forward my complaints about the church. The Fuhrer shares them completely, but does not believe that the church will try anything in the middle of a war. But he knows that he will have to get around to dealing with the conflict between church and state. But at the moment, however, our own extremists are making things too easy for the churches. They are presenting them with cheap ammunition. Christians provide Jews cheap ammunition to use against their critics. They say, oh, you hate us for killing God. Most normal people see Christians crying about Jews or demons that killed God, and it gives them sympathy for Jews and empowers Jewish victimhood. And they recognize this also. Only the church stands in our way now. The church has not abandoned its claim of domination over the secular world. Church rules people's lives. Okay. Christianity destroyed the Roman Empire, according to Hitler. His speech in 1920, did we read this one already? We know that the Jew used Christianity because he knew that this new religion questioned all earthly powers. We did. And so it became an axe at the root of the Roman state. The state which was built on the authority. Yeah, we did read that one. And he, the Jew, became its chief bearer propagator of Judaism through Christianity. Bring about its collapse. Okay. Hitler was not a Christian. Let's see. Mein Kampf. Here's a quote from Mein Kampf now. Christianity could not content itself with the building up of its own altar. It was absolutely forced to undertake the destruction of the heathen altars. Only from this fanatical intolerance could its apodictic faith take form. This intolerance is, in fact, its absolute presupposition. The objection may very well be raised that such phenomena in world history arise from the most part from specifically Jewish modes of thought. In fact, this type of intolerance and fanaticism positively embodies the Jewish nature. We read that one too. And then Christianity is the first spiritual terror entered into far freer ancient world. And since then, the world has been afflicted and dominated by this coercion. Worship the King of the Jews, or you're evil and you're going to burn in hell. That type of a coercion. Adolf Hitler visits Friedrich Nietzsche's archive in Weimar, 1933. What did Nietzsche have to say about Christianity? Forbidden One quotes from Nietzsche and National Socialism. In our schools, says Nietzsche, Jewish history is presented as sacred. Abraham is more important to us than any person in Greek or German history. And what we feel when we read David's Psalms is as different from what reading Pindar or Petrarch arouses us as home and from a foreign land. Nietzsche describes this attraction to the products of an Asian, very distant and very peculiar race, and the world historical irony which gives the people of the Indo-European race the religion book of Semitic people into their hands. It has come to the point where Europeans are already struggling to perceive Jewishness as alien again. Europe has adopted Jewish morality. And we got some other good quotes from Nietzsche, some highlights. Hitler went and visited his, what was it called? His archive. Nietzsche says, "You who hate the Jews so," like these Christian anti-Semites, "you who hate the Jews so, why did you adopt their religion?" The million-dollar question. Another from the Antichrist, Nietzsche says, quote, "This is precisely why the Jews are the most disastrous people in world history. They have left such a falsified humanity in their wake. All the fake Torah, the fake New Testament, all the myths fabricated from Scripture, or Old Testament stories repackaged and plagiarized from previous myths. They have left such a falsified humanity in their wake that even today Christians can think of themselves as anti-Jewish without understanding that they are the ultimate conclusion of Judaism." Christians are the ultimate. I mean, he came to fulfill the law in the new covenant. It's all Judaism. Judaism for the Gentiles. Here's one of my favorites, Nietzsche on Jesus. This Jesus of Nazareth, the incarnate gospel of love, this quote-unquote Redeemer, who brought blessedness and victory to the poor, the sick, and the sinners, was he not this seduction in its most uncanny and irresistible form? A seduction and bypass to precisely those Jewish values and new ideals. You were seduced by the Jewish values and the Jewish stories. Did Israel not attain the ultimate goal of its sublime vengefulness precisely through this bypass of this quote-unquote Redeemer, this ostensible opponent and disintegrator of Israel? Was it not part of the secret black art of truly grand politics of revenge, of a far-seeing, subterranean, slowly advancing, and premeditated revenge, that Israel must itself deny the real instrument of its revenge before all the world as a mortal enemy and nail it to the cross, so that all the world, namely the opponents of Israel, could unhesitatingly swallow just this bait? Dude. So eloquently worded. Christians have swallowed the bait and been seduced by the Jesus character, which is the real instrument of Jewish revenge that they had to reject to get the nations to follow. And could spiritually, subtly imagine any more dangerous bait than this. anything to equal the enticing, intoxicating, overwhelming, and undermining power of that symbol of the Holy Cross, that ghastly paradox of a God on the cross, that mystery of an unimaginable ultimate cruelty and self-crucifixion of God for the salvation of man. Holiday Fairchild for 20 says, Adam, I used to be a fan of Nietzsche until I found out he absolutely hated the Germans. Well, then why did the Germans love him so much? Why was Hitler at his archive? I find this odd that Hitler visited his archive. Additionally, David Irving confirmed to me that the information in the book Hitler's Table Talk is accurate. I know people argue that it's accurate also. Yeah, Volkish Spirit doesn't agree with Nietzsche hating the Germans. But I'm just saying they claim that Hitler Table Talks is not real, that it's a forgery. But we haven't had to rely on that. That's the point. I'm not saying it was a forgery. I've done a video in the past where I read from some of that also, what he said about Christianity. I probably should have included it in this. I'm just showing you don't even have to go there. We're already got a 2-hour video and I'm not done also. This is the most fire quote. The other top, and credit Forbidden One for finding all these. Here's Nietzsche. We read that, did we? Okay, we read that one already. Now the other top German philosopher, Arthur Schopenhauer, on Christianity and Judaism. Now, this wretched religion of the Jews does not do this at all. In fact, it does not even attempt it. It is therefore the crudest and poorest of all religions, and consists merely in an absurd and revolting theism. It amounts to this, that the Lord, who has created the world, desires to be worshipped and adored, and so above all he is jealous, is envious of his colleagues, of all the other gods. If sacrifices are made to them, he is furious, and his Jews have a bad time. All these other religions and their gods are stigmatized in the Septuagint as abomination, but it is crude Judaism without any immorality that really merits this description. It is most deplorable that this religion, Judaism, has become the basis of the prevailing religion of Europe, Christianity. For it is a religion without any metaphysical tendency. But when I observe that the present nations of Europe to a certain extent regard themselves as the heirs to that chosen people of God, I cannot conceal my regret. We don't conceal our regret either. What does he say? It is deplorable that Judaism has become the basis for Christianity, the prevailing religion of Europe. I regret it as well. Another top, Voltaire, I know he's buried in France. Was Voltaire not German, but nonetheless a top European philosopher? Voltaire wrote, quote, "Such is from one end to the other the Old Testament, the father of the new, Sorry, I thought that was a commercial. Hold on, I don't like that noise. Turn it down. Such is from one end to the other the Old Testament, the father of the new, a father who disavows his child and regards it as a rebellious bastard. For the Jews, faithful to the law of Moses, regard with detestation the Christianity that has been reared on the ruins of their law. The Christians, however, have with great subtlety sought to justify the New Testament by the Old. Well, I mean, the whole New Testament is based on the Old Testament. The two religions thus fight each other with the same weapons. They invoke the same prophets and appeal to the same predictions. Voltaire, laying out how Christianity is controlled opposition. We're not going to defeat a Torah prophecy messianic agenda with Christianity, which believes in Jewish messianism and invokes the same weapons as the Jews. They're the originators. They're the ones with the secrets. They're the ones with the upper hand. Things are going their way. And the failed talking points of the Christian anti-Semites is undoubtedly going to lead us to ruin, and we are going to be destroyed if we don't solve the Christian problem. Another one from Voltaire, the Philosophical Dictionary, 1802. But though these books were written by a Jew, what is that to us? The Christian religion is indeed founded on Judaism. We despise and abhor the Jews, and yet we insist that all such of their writings which we have collected bear the sacred stamp of divinity. Never was such a contradiction heard of. Yes, Christian anti-Semitism is a contradiction. Christian religion is indeed, only the top philosophers of Europe are all outlining this. The Christians say, what, you think Adam Green's smarter than Aquinas? You think Adam Green's smarter than the church fathers? You think you're smarter than all the top philosophers? All the top biblical, critical, scholarly Germans? Like this song too. Theodor Fritsch, another German philosopher, said, Christian opponents of the Jews are like those natives who pretend to be white when they dress in European rags, yet they still remain colored people, only that they give away their own kind. So Christian anti-Semites are crypto-Jews giving away their European brothers, shooting us in the back while complaining that we're being divisive, choosing the King of the Jews and their God of Israel over their own families, their own nations, their own people. German philosopher Eugen Dühring says, and this is a credit again to Forbidden One, but I must go one step further. Those who want to hold on to the Christian tradition are not in a position to turn emphatically against Judaism. Historical Christianity, considered in its true spirit, was certainly a reaction within Judaism against Judaism itself, but it nevertheless emerged from within it. Again, all these top philosophers recognizing Christianity is controlled opposition. Christians don't oppose Judaism. They're opposition within Judaism. They're a branch of Judaism. They're messianic, apocalyptic Judaism for the Gentiles. Christians won't oppose the Torah. We try to criticize Torah scripture as the Jewish plan, and Christians say, there's nothing wrong with that. It's only the Talmud, not the Torah. You're limited hangout controlled opposition if you won't let us criticize and oppose the root of the Talmud, the root of Jewish identity. The root of Judaism is all in the Torah, and Christians spread it around like it's the word of God. And will burn pagans in the flames if they don't believe in the chosen Jews and their holy nation of priest prophecies and their holy scriptures. There's another quote from Voltaire that I haven't been able to find the exact citation, but it was something like, the problem with Jews is not that they rejected Jesus, but that they invented Jesus. And whether he said it or somebody else said it or somebody else made it up, it's true, and it's a great point. I think we're almost near the end here. Johann Guntermann in 1940 says, another German, the spread of Christian faith in the Roman Empire has occasionally been openly praised by Jews as a victory for Judaism. The Jew Marcus Eli Ravage writes about it in the Century magazine. The adoption of the Old Testament and the infiltration of Jewish thought, which was commonly associated with the conversion to Christianity, had the consequence that, among other things, the seriously criminal archfathers of the Jewish people were introduced to the other people as figures worthy of veneration, and the abhorrent desert demon Jehovah was equated with the world God who had created all the wonders of nature. It's funny how all of their criticisms, at least all the ones that we're reading here, are all deeply true about Christianity. NSDAP member Werner Graul, 1937, writes, Jesus had been crucified at the request of the high Jewish priests and an incited mob of conservative Jews who had not yet understood that a Jerusalem hopelessly defeated by Rome required a new fighting technique. So one sect of Jews that invented the mythical Messiah from prophecy and wrote a fake prophecy fulfilling magic trick that sold it to the Gentiles was a new fighting technique, a new form of warfare. They couldn't win on the battlefield, so that instead they waged spiritual battle with this new spirit for the victory of Judaism, which was embodied in Jesus, meant a devaluation of all values that had been valid up to that point. Even the high priest trembled for what remained of their power. The Son of Yahweh, Jesus, was crucified, and now his own governor, the Pope, rules in Rome and fulfills Yahweh's will. Judah triumphs in Christianity. You do not know what you worship, but we know what we worship, for salvation is from the Jews. Constantine Brunner, The Hatred of the Jews and the Jews, page 336. And all of these are like not widely publicized. They're in German that these guys apparently can translate German, have been researching, discovering, and many of these posted for the very first time. He writes, but if you now want to de-Judaize culture and expel all Jews and Jewish servants, then above all give up Christ and the apostles and the evangelists. Give up the church fathers and the scholastics. Give up Luther, because you are furious if you can imagine Luther as Luther without the Jews, without Jewish literature. Hand over the biblical books of the Old and New Testaments together. NSD member Werner Graul says, when the walls of Jerusalem were destroyed, when the temple of Jehovah lay in ruins, and the flying eagles of the Roman legions shone above everything, the Jews left Jerusalem and scattered throughout Rome. But they remained Jews, and circumcision held them together, and kosher laws. And on soft, creeping soles, a Christianity conceived by Jews, spread by Jews, made its way into the eternal city. In the catacombs of Rome, Jehovah's vengeance devoured until Jupiter's pillars fell and were built into little windows. The vengeance of the Jews devoured Rome and devoured the conquerors of Rome, the Goths and the Germanic tribes. 1937. Jewish Encyclopedia says, but it was, after all, the glad tidings of the Jew Jesus which won humanity for Abraham's gods. So the Jews know it, the Nazis know it, the Catholics know it, the rabbis know it, everybody knows it. But because of these coping, controlled opposition, lying Christians online, they are preventing the truth from coming forward about Christianity. No, Jesus was not Jewish. I'm sorry, no, Jesus was not Aryan. All of the shit they say. Oh, is that the end of the songs? Okay, let's start over. We got a few more. We're almost done here. Jewish Encyclopedia again on Paul and Paulinism. Still, the credit belongs to him, Paul, of having brought the teachings of the monotheistic truth and ethics of Judaism, however mixed up with heathen Gnosticism and asceticism, home to the pagan world in a form which appealed most forcibly to an age eager for a God in human shape and for some means of atonement in the midst of a general consciousness of sin. Paul, with his austerity, made Jewish holiness his watchword, and he aimed, after all, like any other Jew, at the establishment of the kingdom of God, to whom also his Christ subordinated himself, delivering up the kingdom to the Father when his task of redemption was completed. In order that God might be all in all, he was an instrument in the hand of divine providence to win the heathen nations for Israel's God of righteousness. So even the Catholic or the Jewish Encyclopedia says Paul in Christianity was an instrument of the divine providence to win over the heathen nations for the God of Israel. Garrett Masterpiece McCluskey for 10 says Adam for Führer. No, not trying to be the Führer, guys. All right, let's see what else we have here. 5 from Fire says, I told BOC that he can't oppose the court Jews if he bows to the king of the Jews, so he called me a Nazi. So don't want to worship the king of the Jews and the God of Israel. You're an Amalekite. Okay, Rabbi. Ironically, you can't disagree. Yeah, a lot of influencers LARP as Christian, even if they don't believe it, because they don't want to alienate half their audience. They don't want to be attacked by the Christian mobs and called an Antichrist Jew. They don't want to lose any Christian friends. They don't want to lose Christian supporters and their tithes. Just shill for the controlled opposition religion by all means. Israel the Conqueror, the Australian Hebrew, says, we are often told of the Semitic conquest. If the world was indeed conquered by the Semites, it was with the sword of Paul of Tarsus. Through his agency and that of the apostles, the proud promises of Israel's seers were realized, and the Aryan world, both Greek and Roman, were made to bow beneath the scepter of the Son of David. Bragging about their theological conquest of the Aryans there from this Jewish Hebrew article. The statues of the Caesars were thrown from their bases, because Christians were the woke Jewish sects that were pulling down the statues and blotting out the memory of Amalek, basically, in the name of the God of Israel. The statues of the Caesars were thrown from their bases, and the emperators who most fitly represented Roman prowess and Greek wisdom, the Trajans and Marcus Aurelius, were hurled from their marble pillars to make room for Peter and Paul. The captains of Jesus of Nazareth, the church, is right the Nazarene has conquered. This was the real Semitic conquest, and the Aryan spirit has never recovered from it. Just rubbing it in our faces. German philosopher, I think we read this one. Okay, no, it's not. Another German philosopher totally nailing that Christianity is controlled opposition. However, with the right kind of understanding, the core of the mixture can teach us that it must be a comical situation to want to fight today's Hebrews and engage in anti-Semitism with the New Testament in hand and with reference to the Judean on the cross. To oppose the Jewish tribe today from the standpoint of Christianity, even if it were only from its moral standpoint, is to want to neutralize what is harmful with one of its own offshoots, essentially through itself. If the term controlled opposition existed, they would have done it, or they would have used it. Christian anti-Semitism, he says, the German philosopher says, is comical. Christian anti-Semitism is comical to oppose the Jews with the New Testament that was written and given to us by Jews. To oppose the Jewish tribe today from the standpoint of Christianity is comical, he says. You're not going to in what they're doing. The Christian anti-Semitism is neutralizing real opposition to Yahweh in the prophecy conspiracy. And the Abrahamic gatekeepers create the Judeo matrix, and they try to blackball and slander anybody that wants to. And you don't get platform. You don't get invited on Jake Shields' show to criticize Israel and Zionism and Jews if you don't believe that the Jews were chosen. If you don't criticize them from the Christian perspective, you're not welcome in the JQ naming spheres online. It's pure controlled opposition by these Abrahamic echo chamber gatekeepers. German and French philosophers saw right through the BS. Exactly. Oh, and by the way, for the Christians that never have any real responses and continue to slander and lie about me nonstop, I'm 0% Jewish. My new updated DNA, it used to be I was primarily English with more Norway. It's actually the latest update now has me at 44% Germanic Europe. Control plus to zoom. And I'm only showing this because inevitably everywhere I post and whenever we hear detractors try to say we're wrong, they lie and say that I'm Jewish. No. Pure Viking, pure Northwest European. Germanic Europe, 44. English, 22. 18% Scottish. Green happens to be an English, Irish, Scottish surname. They update every year or so with more algorithms and more people's DNA into their samples. So German, English, Scottish, Irish, Nordic, French, Netherlands, and Wales. That's my background. I wanted to put at the end too, because you know the Christians aren't gonna, and not to mention I'm 6'4" with like the blondest hair ever and bright blue eyes. But what the only retorts, the only opposition we ever hear is these Christians lying and saying I'm Jewish because I don't believe in magical Jewish prophecies. Okay, here, let's see here. I think I have a couple more. We're just under 2.5 hours. So what's this? We have a few more headlines I could show. This wants to load. Masons warned by Untermyer, that was the big Zionist, against the Reich, urges them to profit by mistakes made by the Jews. Masons warn, okay, hold on. This is the one I wanted. Nazis see Jews, Catholics in a plot together. Anti-Christian Nazis. Okay, look at this. So I think this is in the Nuremberg trials. Why is this not zooming in? It says, the defendant, Martin Bormann, stated in a secret, so top Nazi, stated in a secret decree of the party chancellery signed by him and distributed to all, says the National Socialist ideology is far loftier. Why is this not getting bigger? Okay, there we go. Our National Socialist ideology is far loftier than the concepts of Christianity, which is in their essential points have been taken over from Jewry. A differentiation between two various Christian confessions is not to be made here. The evangelical church is just as inimical to the Catholic Church. Hold on, what does it say here? Okay, we're not going to read that one either. All right, I think that about sums it up. Hitler attacks the Old Testament. At first, among the Jewish influence to be wiped out, Hitler listed the Old Testament, Israel's greatest gift to humanity. When Hitler persecuted the Jews, he dealt with one defenseless people, but when he attacked the Old Testament, he aroused the antagonism of the Catholics and Protestants who treasure this sacred literature as part of their holy Bible. The Jews had no defenders, but the Old Testament was precious to millions of Christians. This is the same thing that I experienced. When I started my YouTube channel, I'm exposing Third Temple cultists, Zionists, Christian Zionists, rabbi plans, Chabad, Moshiach, and I'm exposing Torah verses on my show, and the Christians come in and start calling me a Jew because I'm exposing the Torah. You oppose the root of Judaism and the root of the conspiracy, the Hebrew scriptures, and the Christians it arouses antagonism from the Catholics. There it is. And Germans wanted to destroy Christianity. The Nazi hatred of Judeo-Christian morality, a widely circulated German publication by racial theorist Dietrich Hutton, writes, the way in which Christianity is directed in the interest of world Jewry and its attitude towards Judaism is traceable to the undeniable fact that the founders and proclaimers of the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth were full-blooded Jews. It cannot therefore be coincidence or negligence or ignorance that consciously makes Christians deviate from the fundamental tenets of conserving nationality and cultivating race. The reason for this is to defile non-Jewish races, weaken and destroy them, so that Judaism as the chosen people can erect a world sovereignty on the ruins of the non-Jewish races which Christianity has destroyed. So all the lying Christians that are covering up all of this information, and I could keep going. This is really only scratching the surface on this, but I think we've gone over quite enough. My voice in my throat is getting raspy and scratched and dry now. We're going to have to wrap it up. Although maybe in the future we'll do another one. But is it even necessary? Have we not proven our point in spades? How interesting. I'd like to hear your thoughts. How interesting on all of the points, the details and the specifics of what their critiques were of Christianity. Very illuminating and insightful. Fire for 5 says, Adam, imagine a book that presents all of this from perspective of how the evil Nazis hated Christianity to sell to normies and Christcucks. It's so funny. I told See Through It All exactly that. I'm like, you should write an anonymous book. Not See Through It All. Volkish Spirit. I'm like, dude, you could present this book from like the Jewish Christian perspective, and it could be a New York Times bestseller. Because all the research he's done, it's enough to fill a book. And it's all true. Fire says, I will buy Forbidden One's book when it's out along with yours. P.S. You missed another super chat I sent. Okay, I'll look for that. Drum and Bass World says, so in effect, our battle is all because of cowardice, afraid to say the truth. Even some based pagans afraid to offend Christians. True. Fire, I read yours about BOC and worshiping the King of the Jews. I read that. Oh, here's another one. Fire says, there are stories presented by Christians of the Germans liberating villages and opening the churches that had been closed by the Soviets. This is nothing but the good-hearted Germans allowing the victims of communism return to their culture. Okay, I think I got them all. I don't want to miss anybody, and I'm going to go check over on Rumble, and then we'll wrap it up. I learned a lot. It's interesting to see all of these philosophers and all of these people so long ago witnessing all the exact things in Christianity that we all notice. All right. Let's see here. Just real quick, want to check Rumble. I appreciate everybody's support tonight. I'm not seeing anything on Rumble. I hope I didn't miss any. Sometimes they disappear if they're gone for too long. Okay. Thank you, Yahwehist, for 50. Thank you, Alabama Yeoman, pronounced Wagner. Okay, we read that one. Optics Prime says Hitler used terror to overcome Christian authority in Germany as a means to an end. Yahwehist says it's not Yahwehist, but for some reason Rumble cuts it off, or maybe I set it up wrong. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Huge show. Finally got it done. This one's been hanging over my head for a while. I've been wanting to do it. I knew it would be a lot of reading, and it took a lot of prep just to go back and find all these postings that Volkish Spirit and Forbidden One and Quote Miner have put up, and then get them all in order and read them all. Definitely one of my most reading intensive streams. Why don't we end with one more clip?
Just to give one more example, if you look at the words, this is not a quote from Hitler. This is the words of the Hitler Youth song. This is the song that Hitler gets to power in 1933. He creates this German Nazi youth movement called the Hitler Youth that everyone belongs to. And they had a song, and this is not the words in German, it's the translation in English. This is every kid in Germany is singing this song from 1933 to 1945. And it goes like this. We are the joyous Hitler Youth. We don't need any Christian virtue. Our leader, meaning Hitler, is our savior. The Pope and rabbis shall be gone. We want to be pagans once again.
They sang that the Pope and rabbis will be gone. That's so funny.
I shall be gone. Our leader, meaning Hitler, is our savior. The Pope and rabbis shall be gone. We want to be pagans once again. Wow. That's unbelievable. It's not even, it's right out there. We don't want any of your ethical monotheism. Just to give one more example.
All right. So there it is. I appreciate everybody for the huge support tonight. $100 to top us over 500 says, I'm proud to say I called bullshit on Christ before I called bullshit on Santa Claus, but I never would have figured all this out or openly expressed it without you doing all this. Can't thank you enough, Adam. You are very welcome. Thank you so much, EIQ Mystic. And thank you to everybody else that's done the research that helped open my mind to all of this information. This one's going to go down in the history books. This one's going to age well in posterity. I'm not aware of anybody else doing such a epic, information-packed and heavily sourced and researched stream, 2.5 hours on this topic. But it is overwhelmingly clear their view that Christianity was a problem that needed to be solved. And we are going to be destroyed unless we solve the Christian problem. Jesus is fake and Jewish, and we're destined to lose until people figure that out. $100 from Bow Hunter. Oh, my gosh. I just tuned in. Sounds like I missed a great show. We'll catch on the replay. I thought it was a great show. The chat seems to think so. Huge shout out once again, Volkish Spirit and Forbidden One and Quote Miner for all of this research. Wouldn't have been possible without you guys. Thank you so much, EIQ Mystic, Bow Hunter. You guys are incredible. Zyokuk says, Hail Odin. Epic stream for the history books. I love you all. I got a debate on Friday. I got a huge show exposing the Torah on Wednesday with Gnostic Informant. Stay tuned. Share this video. Clip this video. Sections of it. Share it. Let's not let these lying Christians cover up the true view that people of history had about Christianity. We can't allow them to cover it up. No more. Anytime, any thread they're posting this bullshit, this video, I hope, will be spammed by all of you. All right. Love you all. Everybody have a nice night, and I will see you guys very soon. Take care.